All right, thank you, Pappy, and welcome everybody to our Tuesday Inspiration. Today, we are going to be talking about responsibility. So we are on our fourth of our 4 core values. So a couple of quick Zoom things. At the very top of your screen, there is a place for you to switch into speaker view, which I highly recommend so that you can see the person that is talking. We do ask that everyone remains on mute during this so that we're able to hear each other, because it does tend to bounce video back and forth. If you really like a song or love a quote, you can give some spirit fingers to the person that said it or a song that was sung. And feel free to use the chat box during this to discuss the core value. We're going to take some time to ask some questions, and we'd love your input on those answers. So first, I'm going to toss it to Pappy. He's going to do just a brief explanation of why we do Tuesday Inspiration.
Thank you, Emma. Hi, everybody. In 1844, the Y became an open door, but not really. What really happened was that there was this thing going on in London, England called the Industrial Revolution, and factories were being built all over the town to build all these new inventions that were coming along, like the sewing machine and the washing machine. And they needed people to work in these factories. And so young children, people your age, were coming off the farms for the first time. Remember, in those days, England was an agricultural society. And so for the first time, these kids were coming off the farms and coming into the big city. Woo, it was a scary place. And working conditions were terrible, but here were the jobs, and they could make a little money and so on. But like I say, it was a bad deal and for a lot of them. And so George Williams, who was a kind man who wanted to help, thought that Bible study would be the answer. So he invited some fellows to come to his house to study the Bible. It became popular. It became known as the Young Men's Christian Association, or the YMCA. It came to America, it swept across the country, and lasted that way pretty much as a male boys and men Christian mission for a long time, until around the 1960s, when, because of societal reasons, we opened our doors to women. And shortly after that, we opened our doors to all races and religions and creeds. And so, you see, we are firmly based in a theological background. So it makes sense that there is a spiritual side of the YMCA, spirit, mind, and body. And so today, because we're open to everyone, we try to express our spiritual side through the core values, which are respect, responsibility, caring, and honesty. We could have an urge attack if we were, I don't think you can have a virtual urge attack. Anyway, so today I think we're going to talk about responsibility, and we're going to kick it off with a song that I think is about responsibility, that was made popular by Peter, Paul, and Mary in the 1960s. The version, however, that landed in Camp Seymour was made popular by a guy named Trini Lopez. Which that's funny, but I can't explain to you why. Anyway, it goes like this. Well, if I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out warning, I'd hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Whoa, 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 whoa. Well, if I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring out danger, I'd ring out warning, I'd ring out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Well, if I had a song, I'd sing it in the morning, sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out warning, I'd sing out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Whoa, 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 whoa. And if I had a song, got a song, well, I've got a hammer and I've got a bell. I've got a song to sing all over this land. It's the hammer of justice, it's the bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Thank you, Pappy, for opening us up with that song. So as we keep going today, we're going to hear some quotes that kind of help us explore the different parts of responsibility, as well as some stories and some more songs with Pappy. So when I think of responsibility, the first thing that comes to my mind is the chores that I had to do as a kid, like folding laundry or putting away the dishes. But responsibility is kind of a big word, a lot like respect is. And so we're gonna kind of investigate some of the different parts of responsibility as we go through today and talk about the different ways that we can be responsible, not only for ourselves, but other people as well. So I'm gonna invite Nick up first to share our first quote today.
Hey guys, so the first quote is, "You cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by hating it today." And that was by Abraham Lincoln. And I know this isn't really what he meant by it when he said it, but when I think of that quote, I think of how like we have to take care of the earth. We have to be responsible for it because we are the caretakers of the earth for the people that will come after us. And by, neglecting it and not taking care of it and being responsible for it today, it's only going to be a lot worse for the people of tomorrow and as we get older. So when I think of responsibility, definitely one of the things I think about is being responsible and taking care of the earth, and plant a tree, recycle, that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Nick. It's a great time to plant a tree. Love gardening during this time. And Ellie has our second quote. If you want to share that, Ellie.
Thank you. Sorry. You must take personal responsibility. You cannot change the circumstances, the seasons, or the wind, but you can change yourself. That's something you have charge of. Jim Rohn. And what that means to me is that in our lives, our circumstances aren't always up to us, but how we handle the issues that arise with those circumstances are a choice. And we can choose to be responsible in those situations, or we can choose to be rash and let our troubles blind us. Like if you think of COVID-19, for instance, our current circumstances are kind of crazy, and not being able to leave the house, see friends, go to school, so many places are shut down. You can ignore those rules and guidelines and visit your friends, or you can take that practice, or you can decide to practice social distancing and take that responsibility to slow the spread and do our part for our families and our neighbors and ourselves, so keeping us all safe.
Woo-hoo. That's awesome, Ellie. Thanks for sharing that. Responsibility really comes out in days like these for sure. And so next on deck is I'm going to have Lincoln, and he's going to share a story with us about responsibility. And as he tells this story, you can share in the chat different ways that you see responsibility coming through. So take it away, Lincoln.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. I'm going to tell a story quickly about one of my idols, one of the people that I look up to and try to emulate in my own life. And his name is Ernest Shackleton. And Shackleton has died. He's not with us anymore. He was back around World War I, right before World War I. He was kind of on the twilight. That means the end of the explorer era. So people were still sort of leaving from Western countries in Europe mostly. And this is a challenging concept to think about. But at that point in time, they were exploring Arctic Circle and Antarctica specifically for Ernest Shackleton. Ernest Shackleton was actually very interested in exploring the Antarctic Circle. And he had a boat called the Endurance. And he set out to explore the Arctic, to cross Antarctica, to be the first person to cross Antarctica. And he actually had kind of a different way of doing things. When he built his crew, he didn't go out and find people to be the best carpenter he could find or the best sailor he could find. He didn't prioritize skills. He prioritized attitude. He wanted to find people on his crew to go on an expedition with him that had good attitudes and they could get along and could enjoy each other's company. And the reason this is important is that Ernest Shackleton's journey was a catastrophe. It was terrible. He actually, almost everything that possibly could go wrong went wrong, and they were able to stay together as a group and survive close to years out living on the ice because of their attitudes. And I have above my, I'm going to turn off my background here for a second. I have a photo of the Endurance right there, if y'all can see that. This is his ship. And at this point in time that this photo was taken, they were trapped on an ice shelf. And what had happened is ice had formed around their ship and frozen their ship in place. And it was stuck and it wasn't going to move. And the ice kept on putting pressure on the boat and it crushed the boat and the boat sank. You imagine you're out in the middle of the ocean, ice shelf, close to Antarctica, and your boat gets crushed and it's sinking. You hop off onto the ice and you're like, well, we're on the ice now. And then they dragged all of the things across the ice and they shot in rowboats out to an island. And from there, they sent a smaller group out to a different island and came back to the hub they left from years earlier. And they showed up with beards and they were like, I'm Ernest Shackleton. And the people were like, no, you're not. He left 2 years ago to cross Antarctica. And he's like, no, I'm Ernest Shackleton. And it was really, really intense. But everyone survived. And I think it's important when we approach this time, these days right now, when we're having these difficult times, to think about responsibility as an attitude. Because honestly, I was having this conversation with Scotty earlier today, if we're doing our dishes, but we do our dishes at home after we kick and we scream and we fight, and we say, I don't want to do my dishes. And finally you end up doing the dishes get done. But really, we've created more problems, and that's not being responsible, right? It's different than having a good attitude and getting the dishes done and playing our part and being a member of our society. And what's important to think about, not necessarily responsibility as the things we do, but how we do them and how we approach them with our attitudes and making sure our attitudes respect good responsibility. Because ultimately, responsibility doesn't happen if we have bad attitudes. We have to be committed to each other, caring, and all these other things to be responsible. And that's what I think is important to think about. So let's all set a goal for ourselves when we look forward these next couple of weeks and how we can make sure that we're not only doing the things we need to do to be responsible, but we're doing them in a way that allows it to be a positive experience for others. Because ultimately, responsibility is not achieved without a good attitude. It needs to be hand in hand. So that's my story. And if y'all are interested in Shackleton, I highly recommend the book, The Endurance. It's fascinating, his story. And it's so cool, and it influences everything, especially camp too. We work on attitudes. Everyone here, you have to have a good attitude. So nice. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing with us, Lincoln.
Hey,
The first time that you introduced me to Ernest Shackleton. So that book is on my list to read this month. So that leads well. Hi,
Patty's
Patty.
got something to say.
I just wanted to say, just for a visual, I realized that Logan's right there next to me. So if you were thinking about what Shackleton looked like when he left, he kind of looked like Logan. 2 years later, when he came back, he kind of looked like me.
You're right,
That's a
Patty.
rough-
Thank you for sharing this.
That's a rough 2 years.
It's a long 2 years there. But that story leads really well into the next section of quotes that we have that are about our responsibility to other people and the world. So I'm going to have Kari hop on and join us and share the quote that she has for today.
Sorry. Okay. Not responding is a response. We are equally responsible for what we don't do. Jonathan Foer. And what this quote means to me is I kind of interpret it as pertaining to responsibility in the sense that turning a blind eye to something is only a statement of tolerance and of acceptance, and refusing to acknowledge something only allows it to continue unopposed. And I personally believe that it's your civic duty to speak out against something if you don't believe in it or find it unjust, because if you don't, who will? If not now, then when? And, you know, some people might not share the same passion about something that you do, and nobody will ever know that someone has a passion about something unless you actually express it.
Thank you, Kari, for sharing that. There's a phrase that we use a lot at camp that has to do with litter, but it applies widely. It's if it's not you, who will pick it up? And if not now, when? So like you said, we have to also take responsibility.
Emma,
Logan, would you?
The end of that phrase is, if nobody littered, there would be no litter.
That is also very true. All right, Logan, why don't you hop on and share our next quote?
All right. So Emma gave me a quote from one of my favorite artists of all time, Bob Dylan. A hero is someone who understands the responsibility that comes with his freedom. And this wasn't, necessarily an easy quote, I guess, to kind of put into perspective, especially today when a lot of us are stuck staying at home and being, feeling like we're not able to do a lot of things with our time. But this opens up opportunities for us to have more time than ever to really be able to do things that we normally wouldn't be able to do. And that's not also me saying that every single moment of your day needs to be the most productive of it. I'm not saying that at all. Take the time to really make sure that you're doing okay physically, mentally, emotionally, but also think about the awesome things that you can take responsibility for in your life right now, and you can improve upon yourself, whether that's taking on a language, trying to reach out to some old friends that you haven't talked to in years, or maybe even creating some new friendships over some platforms, like Zoom, or maybe some of your school platforms and things like that. So that's kind of what I took away from that quote, especially given today's climate.
Thanks, Logan. So we're going to move into just a little bit of a discussion about some of the different aspects of responsibilities. So I'm going to pose some of these questions to our wonderful staff on the Zoom call, but I encourage you to answer that question as well in the chat box, and we can share out some of those answers. So my first question is going to be for Nick. And Nick, what does taking responsibility mean?
Taking responsibility means that you're doing things that you have to do, whether or not they might be fun or entertaining at the time. You're still doing them because you know that they're things that you have to do in order to be better prepared or set up in the future. And just because you don't want to do it, it's still probably the best thing to do. And taking responsibility means you do those things because you know that it's going to leave you better off.
What does that mean when it's, maybe something that we didn't do, but somebody else did? How can we take responsibility for that?
Yeah, so similar to the quote that I talked about from Abraham Lincoln, if somebody has done something, and like we're walking into it again with like the earth and the planet, the people before us have taken care of the planet so that we can have a good environment to live in, and it's also our responsibility to do the same thing for the people that come after us.
Thanks, Nick, for sharing that. McKenna also shared that one thing she does to be responsible is doing her schoolwork, even though she would rather be drawing. And it's important that we finish out some of the responsibilities we have so that we can also do the things that we enjoy. And Ellie mentioned that you accept everything you do as your own actions, and you do these actions with full awareness of of the repercussions that could come after that. So, all right, so Siobhan, my next question is going to be for you. Do you consider yourself to be a responsible person, and in what ways?
Hi, Emma. I sometimes consider myself to be a responsible person. Sometimes it gets really hard. Right now, I'm home, I'm not at school, and I have classes that I have to get up early in the morning and log on to a Zoom call just like this one to be like in class and to listen to lecture and to talk and have discussion with all of my classmates, and that's hard. Right now, everything kind of, thanks, Scotty. Right now, everything kind of feels like a vacation, right? You don't really feel like you're in an academic mindset. But, you know, I wake up at 8:30, I make a cup of coffee, and I log on to Zoom because, you know, if I'm not there, uh, I don't get to speak my voice to the class. And I'm definitely missing out. And it kind of takes away if everybody decided, hey, I don't really want to go to class today. I'm like not feeling like it. I'd rather just sleep in. We wouldn't be able to have the kind of constructive discussions that we do.
Sure. And Siobhan, a lot of people are agreeing that you're a very responsible person.
I appreciate it.
My last question is going to be for Logan. Logan, what is something that you or our friends on this Zoom call can take responsibility for today?
That's a good one. You know, for me personally, taking care of the little things that can easily pile up in a week's span is something that I can take responsibility for. So, for example, today I'm doing my laundry. I need to make sure I have a little more consistent of a schedule, but it's those little things that can pile up over the week. So, you know, doing the laundry, taking out the garbage, helping out around the house. You know, it does seem like, okay, we all live in this house together and we're doing everything and we're living together. It can feel like, okay, why do I have to take out the garbage again? But doing the little things, and it always accumulates to being a responsible person, making sure you do it the right way every single time, no matter the circumstances.
I also have to fold my laundry today, Logan. What were some of the things that you were responsible for when you grew up?
Yeah, so for me personally, when I was growing up, you know, I definitely had some responsibilities that were helping out in the household, you know, whether that be, you know, making sure that I'm doing my daily chores, checking in and having that family opportunity time, but also responsibility I have to myself, my future in school. You know, making sure that I'm doing my homework on a day-to-day basis, making sure that I'm reaching out if I need help, whether that be somebody in the house or somebody that works in the school system, so that they can help me be successful in the long run. So there's a little bit of self-advocacy that goes into that, and there's a little bit of putting the ego aside and saying, hey, you know, I'm struggling with this, but I know that I need to reach out for help to make sure I'm successful.
Absolutely. So I would encourage everyone today, you can talk to the people that you live with and find out if there's something that you could take responsibility for that would help alleviate maybe some of the burden on someone else. And maybe that's you know, a weekly call with a relative or taking out the trash without having to be asked. But ask someone what you can be responsible for today. With that, I'm going to throw it back to Pappy, who's going to play Blowing in the Wind. Hey, Pappy, you're on mute.
Sorry, I forget. Just start talking. Forget about the knobs. This is a song by Bob Dylan, and I'm just going to say real quickly that recently, you know, being at home a lot by myself, I've been spending a lot of time on YouTube And I got on the other day to a John Prine thing. For those of you who don't know, he passed away recently, the death of a great American genius, and the author of a couple of the songs in our songbook. But it led me to a place where I was looking at Arlo Guthrie and Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger and Bob Dylan, and it reminded me so much of these times when I was you guys' age and I was I was making the attempt to become a professional folk singer. And nice hair, McKenna. So this song was one of the songs that influenced. It actually influenced me because people kind of wonder, why did I get into folk music instead of rock and roll or jazz? And the reason why was because there was a political element to it. There was a social element to it, and I wanted to make those statements that I believe that you know, it was kind of an unjust time, not unlike our times right now, and those are things that I wanted to speak to, and Bob Dylan spoke to them. And one of the reasons these songs are in our songbook and have endured at camp was because a lot of the people who worked in camp back in those days and brought these songs to camp were people who also wanted to work on social justice and these issues. And so that's why we do these songs. So here we go. Let's sing How Many Roads Must a Man Walk Down? How many roads must a man walk down before they call him a man? How many times must the white dove say before she sleeps in the sand? And how many times must the cannonball before they're forever banned? Well, the answer, my friend, is going in the wind. The answer is going in the wind. How many years must the mountain exist before it's washed to the sea? And how many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? And how many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? Oh, the answer, my friend, is going in the wind. Oh, the answer is going in the wind. How many times can a man look up before he can see the sky? How many years must one man have before he can hear people cry? How many deaths will it take to believe that too many people have died? Oh, the answer, my friend, going in the wind. The answer is going in the wind. Oh, the answer is going in the wind.
Thanks, Pappy. And now for our final couple of quotes for today, I'm going to toss it to Siobhan.
Thank you, Emma. My quote is, "Remember, every one of us is responsible to make the world a joyful place," by Debshish Mirda. And I love this quote because one of my favorite things in the whole world is to put a smile on somebody else's face. I love it. I love making people laugh. I love making people smile. And that's, why I love working at camp. It's like, that's a huge part of the job, is creating this space where people laugh and smile and want to do the same for others. And well, it's fine to have bad days. And like, obviously I have bad days too, where like, well, I don't want to talk to anybody today. Like, I'm just not feeling like singing and dancing and like running around. It's my responsibility to not make anybody's day worse. And it's not my it's definitely my responsibility to try and say, hey, Siobhan, it's okay. Today's not great, but tomorrow will be better. And tomorrow we can get back to making the world a better place.
Absolutely. I think that ties in great with what, Pappy was saying and what Lincoln was saying before, is everything flows and together, and we're responsible for the world as a whole. And so, Ellie, I'm going to have you come up and read our last quote for today.
That's awesome, Siobhan. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Martin Luther King Jr. And personally, I see that quote emphasizes like the importance of doing the right thing, even if the circumstances don't line up to how you wanted them to, and being respectful in every single situation.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us today for our Tuesday Inspiration. I hope you've learned a little bit more about responsibility and maybe have some ideas of how you can continue to be a responsible person going forward. I'm going to throw it back to Pappy, and he's going to sing us out with This Land Is Your Land.
Woohoo! A song made famous in the 1960s by the New Christy Minstrels. That was the group I was in. I know you guys have never heard of them. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that golden highway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Everybody sing, this land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. I rode in rainbow and I followed my footsteps from the sparkling sands of her diamond desert, while all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. Now this land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. Well, the sun came shining as I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving, and the dust clouds rolling, and smoke was lifting, a voice was chanting. This land was made